Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello, welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton coming to you with episode number 64. And in this episode, we're going to talk about why there are some reasons that make keto the very best thing and the very worst thing, and they're the same things. It's just how you interpret them. So stay tuned for figuring out what the heck I'm talking about. So you know what I've been contemplating recently is that one of the very best things about keto is, so there's this quote in business, a couple people say similar things, Drucker and Tim Ferriss and a bunch of other people. So I can't attribute this to exactly one person, but certainly it could be attributed to multiple people that basically say that one of the best things you can do in business is make the one decision that removes 100 decisions. So what does that mean? Well, it's like, as an example, Tim Ferriss, who's a podcaster and a writer, who gets asked to do a lot of like book blurbs and things like that, and gets a lot of emails. And so he makes these rules where he's just said, I do not read books written less than a year ago, right? So if it's 2020, he says, I do not read any books written after 2019. That's a funny rule, right? It's like, well, why that rule? Well, it totally eliminates the need to read any unpublished books which people try to send him every single day because he's a famous author, right? A successful author. So now he has a rule which eliminates a ton of work that he might otherwise have to do, but allows him to live his life in a livable way. Similarly, he actually has an email responder that basically says, I don't respond to emails. Right? He's created one rule that eliminates a ton of work. And so one of the awesome things about a ketogenic diet is that there are rules, there are guidelines in keto that keep you on the rails and keep a lot of bad foods out, right? So if you say, well, I don't eat carbohydrates, or I don't eat X foods, right? I don't eat potatoes, I don't eat grains, I don't eat these kind of things. Well, when you say you don't eat those foods specifically, well, it eliminates a ton, right? You're eliminating pastries and cookies and cakes. Are those all pastries? Anyway, but you don't eat French fries and you don't eat this and you don't eat that. Like, it cuts all of those foods out, right? And so it eliminates a ton of decisions you might have to make in terms of eating foods that do not contribute to your health. And you've drawn a really hard line on those things. It's not, well, I eat French fries, but I can only eat 100 calories of French fries before, you don't have to, it's not like you're micromanaging carbs. You're just saying, I eat these and I don't eat those. Some of those food lists, the yes foods, no foods, right? That is one of those choice limiters that can actually lead to an enormous amount of freedom, because it draws a hard line and eliminates this decision fatigue that we can get into when we're trying to make decisions about what to eat that don't draw hard lines, but then we're left sort of seesawing between yes, no, yes, no. And that is, I think, one of the very underappreciated benefits of keto is that you get to say, no, I'm keto, I don't eat these foods, and point to a whole bunch of foods, many of which I would say are not conducive to a easy time of losing body fat, For many of us, there are exceptions to that for sure. But for those of us that are inclined to especially overeat carbohydrate heavy foods, especially highly processed carbohydrate heavy foods, well, that is of extreme benefit. Similarly, just the thing I just mentioned, heavily processed foods, though unfortunately this is changing as keto is getting more and more popular. Back in the day, if you wanted to be keto, you were not eating very many highly processed foods because nobody was making keto-friendly, highly processed foods. Again, that has shifted, but once upon a time, it meant if you were keto, you were primarily going to stick to whole, real foods, which, as we know, for a lot of us, is the way to go. So that was a choice, I'm quote unquote keto, that eliminated a ton of other choices you might have to make, and it kept you on a straight and narrow path. So now for the flip side, why can this also be the worst thing for some of us? Totally confused, I bet, listening to me say that. So keto tends to attract people because of that, the things that I have just mentioned as benefits, people who like extremes, right? It doesn't tend to attract moderators so much as abstainers, which is to say people that have a hard time just eating less of food and they're better off just not eating the food at all, right? And so there are personality types that tends to fit. Unfortunately, what happens on the negative side is that when someone who is keto with an all or nothing sort of attitude hits a roadblock, let's say that person makes what I would probably classify as poor food choice. There are many ways you could say that, but maybe it's that they ate something that falls outside of their yes-no parameters, right? They ate something on their no list. They have a higher tendency to, instead of being able to say, oh, I ate this thing that I shouldn't have eaten because it's not on my approved food list, I will make better choices with my next meal or something like that. They have a higher tendency to say, because they tend to be more all or nothing people, and when I say they, I mean us, they will be more likely to say, well, I had a piece of apple, all hope is lost, I'm off the trail, and I might as well have the entire box of donuts, right? Because they're not so much about nuance, they're more about black and white, yes or no. And while when you can adhere to the black, white, yes, no, it keeps you on the rails, when you have that non-flexible attitude, it can encourage thinking in ways that make you more susceptible to going completely off the rails just because you slipped off the rails slightly, right? Because of that all in or all out tendency. And so this is something I want to warn people about, if you don't know already from your own experience, and say it would be of incredible benefit for you to suffocate that part of your personality that tends to do this, that tends to say, well, I made a small, poor choice, right? By your judgment, I made a choice that was not a good idea. I don't support the choice that I make in hindsight, even if I excused it ahead of time. But now that I'm seeing I made this choice, that this choice is in my rearview mirror, I'm now feeling like that means I'm a failure and I might as well eat all the things because I've opened that door. I've opened the door to things outside of my rule book. So you really want to fight that disinhibition, is what it would be called, sort of in more scientific circles, that way in which you've released the inhibition, and now everything feels like fair game. And so you have to really fight that and get yourself to say, like, this small choice that I now condemn that I made is done and made, and compounding it with further choices are going to be extremely negative. And therefore, I will stop the train right here and not continue to make bad choices, even though I feel as though that one choice was outside of the limits. I wish I hadn't made it, but it's done. You're done. You should be done. You need to stop, right? You need to stop and go back to the way that works for you. So I guess I just wanted to point out that the personality tendencies we have that make us attracted to keto, make keto work for us, can also be the very reasons that we have a personality that then when we have a slip from keto or we make a choice that we regret, it can actually blow up in our face worse than somebody who has maybe the type of personality that is less, would tend to choose an approach like keto far less because they prefer moderation to abstination. And so I think that it's important to notice this, to recognize it, to understand it about our personality, and to put in place tripwires that remind us, hey, just because you made one choice doesn't mean you have to turn it into a thing. It can just be a minute. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. All right? So that's my bit of advice for today. I'll be back with all of you very soon. I've got a series of interviews coming up. We've got Georgia E., we've got Ken Berry, we've got Nisha Berry, and many more. So we'll be heading into a bit more interview-heavy podcast, and I'm looking forward to it. But I hope you've enjoyed this period of some little tips and tricks and notes and thoughts about keto, and I look forward to being with you again very soon. Take care, everybody. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.